Zone. Rich Sutter, Pete Coles. We're in the fallout from the NBA draft last night. 2025 NBA first-round draft has taken place, and there's some things to be said right now. I'm going to get into that later, but welcome back, everybody. We've enjoyed a good run here. Last week we put up our own draft, and Pete will have some of that for you today, juxtaposed to the current draft that they had. And I would say I wish some of these guys might have called us, Pete, because every single year it seems like 1 through 6 kind of goes smooth, but then mayhem just breaks loose, man. Mayhem broke loose last night, most notably in Brooklyn. No sleep till Brooklyn. Well, they got it wrong 5 times, maybe, Pete. We'll have to discuss and break that down. But they might have went 0 for 5, kind of like the Mets. Right now they're not swinging and hitting down there in Brooklyn for sure. I really was puzzled. I was sitting there watching. I posted last night on social media, what are the Nets doing after the 3rd or 4th pick that they made? Then the trade for Drake Powell, that was a pick. I don't get these teams drafting somebody and then trading them away to another team that night for a pick later on down the road when you just gave up a first-round pick. I don't understand the strategy of some of that, but some of it is roster-driven, I'm sure, or can be also possibly salary cap-driven. You have to dive into that a little deeper, but we have a segment of the show called Pete's Corner. So we're going to get back into that. We skipped it last week on the draft side because we had so much to cover there, but this is a favorite segment of our show where Pete formulates, postulates, and puts together 3 questions. And he's on the gun today because I didn't tell him we were going to do this. He thought we were just going to do draft, but I got him under the gun today, so he's got to quickly had to put together a 1, 2, 3 punch here, folks. So since this morning, Pete hasn't really known about this. So shoot it, Pete.
All right, I got a humdinger for you right off the bat.
Love it.
Was Danny Ainge right in amassing picks and getting the Celtics to where they are? Because you saw the nightmare that happened with Brooklyn last night. So was Danny Ainge right with his philosophy of the draft?
I would say that the philosophy has a chance to be right.
Okay.
If you draft the right guys.
All right.
But also, in this,
we'll get into this year later on.
If you look at drafts in the past, I mean, we've read out some drafts in the past where, you had guys who were, Allen Iverson, number 1. You went all the way down and you saw some other guys, way, way down there that turned out to be Hall of Famers. I don't think that's in this draft. Really don't.
I haven't seen that in a while, honestly.
So disappointed in, everybody was talking about this being a great, great draft. I was so disappointed in the depth of at least the way they went, and I looked at this board last night and I looked at 30 names. I got 4 F grades, Pete. I got 4 D grades. I graded them already. Wow. I gave a grade the minute they drafted them. And so it was just in that moment, I was sitting there, I watched the entire draft, put down pick by pick by pick, and put a grade right next to each one of them. We're going to give those grades out. But before we get into Pete's Corner, we had 4 Fs and 4 Ds. So the NBA... Man.
All right, so do you think Ainge is right in his philosophy of it? Because people try now to amass a zillion picks, and it doesn't seem to help.
And I think it's situational on what draft you're in.
All right.
Also,
okay.
Last night's draft wasn't where you would want to have 5 first-rounders, honestly, unless you picked them exactly right and looked like you were building a franchise. What the Nets did was draft like 3 guys that are almost identical to each other, and I think they're going to... I was just absolutely shaking my head. And I'm going to go out on a limb here with some of these players and say, man, they were elevated way, way above their status by hype.
Okay.
All right? I'll give you a bunch of examples here real quick. Jeremiah Fears, Okay, 1 year at Oklahoma, solid year, but huge turnover numbers, and also shooting wasn't there. Shooting under 30% from 3-point range. Okay, that's a tough sin to have in the NBA.
All right, before you
So,
get too deep into this,
do you want to have 5 picks? You know, to answer to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
pick,
yeah.
is the Danny Ainge strategy the right way to do it? I would say to do it right you would want to have them broken up into other years instead of having 5 this
do
year.
like three,
and
three,
2.
three.
Yeah, I would. Right now, I would. If
Okay.
I was in previous drafts and you drafted 5 of the guys, you know, that you could mention in a previous draft in the first round, you could have turned your team around completely. I just don't know, and I certainly can tell you I don't think they did anything to help their team last night with the 5 draft picks. Several of them I don't think will make their team. I'll say it right now. Several of those picks do not even make the Nets team. I talked with Pete earlier. I'm really interested in hearing the NBA, the Nets, and everybody else's security plan around Mr. Saraf. I'd love to hear the protocols on that one. All right? But Pete, again, let's go back to Ainge. All right? He amassed a bunch of different picks. But right now, where is Danny Ainge? He's in Utah.
Yeah,
And where is Utah? They're in the basement of the NBA.
almost DFL.
Yeah. See that? All right. So, I again, it's situational. The NBA is situational. I think they also have their finger on the scale a little bit. I don't think they care about the Hornets. I don't think they care about Toronto. I don't think they care about the Jazz, personally. I think they have their favorites up atop there that they think are major media markets or markets that they have to have for NBA history and lore, such as the Celtics. And then, you know, you have that whole East Coast, West Coast setup and dynamic, which is always kind of driven to, you know, proliferate the situation. But right now, the NBA's got massive problems with that. And going to again, back to it, right now having 5 number ones probably isn't healthy. So to have that strategy now and going into years forward, I would say is deleterious. They should have wrapped up 2 of those guys and tried to get a veteran player, my opinion. Taking 3 guys in the first round, I mean, there were 3 guys there that were draftable and would have been good players for the Nets, but I think they missed almost on every single one. But, you know, now it's just gonna get worse there. You know, their coach is from Spain. You know, they're doing this thing. It looks like they're trying to start a United Nations in Brooklyn. You know, Egor Demen is from Russia. Nolan Traore is from France. You know,
So he's drafting guys he knows.
I would assume they're going international because that's his style of play, so to speak. But, you know, I think they just made some huge, and also their draft room last night looked like a fraternity having a keg party. They were high-fiving, jumping up and down like they were at a fantasy football draft. A bunch of guys drinking beer at a fantasy football draft. I mean, I thought it was very unprofessional as well, too. And again, I don't know what y'all were jumping around about.
Shows the culture of the...
I have no idea what you were all jumping around about. If I was you guys, I would have left there with a bunch of ski masks on so nobody would have known who you were. All right, Pete, hit me with number 2.
Question number 2. Is the NCAA laughing quietly behind the scenes of this draft? Because a lot of the good players went back to the NCAA this year because NIL would pay them more money than coming through the draft would.
And it's a great characterization of the way to put it. They're laughing all the way to the bank, right? They got all their good players back predominantly. You know, yeah, they lost Flagg. They lost 4 Duke players. You know, Tyrese Proctor did not get taken in the first round. Probably an early second-round pick tonight. But the 3, Duke went with 3 top 10s. You know, they had 3 in the top 10. So, you know, I just, you know.
I'm sitting there. Our former governor's back there going, we fixed you guys.
I think, you know, that's been by design. where the NBA
Yeah.
has to pay huge contracts for these guys when they do come in. And what was amazing to me was when they were talking about Ace Bailey in particular, they were talking about how he could drop because of his stance of not talking to teams, not going to tryouts. And we'll talk about that in a second because he may have rewritten the paradigm here a little bit, you know. But Pete's going to put up something for us, and we'll get into that in a second. But we're going to finish with Pete's corner. But, you know, another great question. I would think that the NCAA feels pretty. I'm gonna lean in your area of where the question kind of leaned. I think they're definitely laughing. I think they're, especially after this draft right now, man. And I still think the second round is going to be like prevalent. There's a lot of good players in the second round. If you pay attention and you have some picks in the second round, you can do well, you know. But the way the Nets approached this, man, it was like they were trying to give it away. I don't understand it. But that's a great question. I think the NCAA is positioned well in this thing because they can pay. Now, what Cooper Flagg's numbers, he ain't getting that a year now, unless he keeps his endorsements, unless he keeps all that money that was coming in from Duke on the side. You know, I don't know how you keep that. His regular contract's going to be a good contract for an NBA. You know, you're going to make good money, but he was supposed to be in the $20 million range last year at Duke. That was his NIL deal. It was in excess of $20 million.
Wow, that's amazing.
So now, no matter what you do, you're going to. So what people would say, why didn't you just stay at Duke for 4 years? And eventually, I think that's going to be your point, Pete. I think that could be the future. I think you just asked a question of the future. That's a good one. All right, man. Let's go to 3.
All right, so why should anybody have watched this NBA Finals? Because it seems like it's very pedestrian. It seems like they pushed it to 7 games just for the TV time.
Boy, there's under such criticism, and it's such valid criticism. People are watching it. It's today's world. What the expectation is don't believe your lying eyes.
Yeah.
That's the expectation now. What you're seeing on TV isn't real. So let's get deep into it. If we had clips right here, we would show you Shai Gilgeous-Alexander absolutely getting away with larceny here in this final, pushing off, getting away with stuff that nobody else got away with. And then you go and you look at the Pacers, they would go and play normal defense, get into it a little bit, and the refs are blowing the whistle left and right. And it did look to me, Pete, like they wanted them to have, you know, they call a couple of the refs there, you know, the guys they bring in, that crew they bring in when they need a Game 7. You know, when they want it to go Game 7, they have that on the internet. It's all over the internet, and they got guys attached to it as well. And some of the numbers of their production of sending teams and moving finals and moving the games on is, you know, it's quite impressive. Not helping the NBA, Pete. I'm going to close up Pete's corner with this. All right. When you get to a place where they are right now, where everything they do is busted, absolutely busted, you got to fire everybody. You got to blow up the NBA. You got to get rid of all of it and start over. Because right now, they're losing faith. They're losing legitimacy. And the next thing that comes from that was they'll be crawled up into the government's arm as a subsidized entity. Okay? They're already there. Okay? Who do you think pays for those stadiums? Who do you think pays for those arenas? What kind of deal are they getting on those? How are the bonds sold, and who pays for the bonds? Taxpayers do. And they're on the line, whether you like it or not, whether you like sports or not. You know, I think it's interesting. All right? Now, Pete, I want to go to the clip that I sent you where we have our friend Mr. Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting, because they tried a little bit to Shedeur Sanders, Ace Bailey here. All right, everybody was talking on the TV because here was the situation. I got to take you back just one step before we run the clip. Ace Bailey did not go and work out with teams. He did not go and meet with teams. which was against basically NBA protocol. He wouldn't sit down and have dinner with executives from the 76ers, from Daryl Morey. Okay? He was represented by a gentleman by the Sharif Cooper, who, in order to get to sit down, allegedly wanted to be paid in order just to sit down, in order just to meet with NBA teams. All right? Pete, run the clip.
They show what you mean.
Here's Ace
We've
Bailey's
already
agent.
offered you a position.
Nobody in this town works without a retainer, guys. You think you can find somebody who does? We tell you have my blessing. But I think we all know that person's not going to represent you as well as I can.
Will, our offer is $84,000 a year plus benefits.
Retainer. Retainer.
You want us to give you
love this
cash
movie.
right now?
Whoa.
It's unbelievable.
No, I didn't say that. Allegedly, your
This is
situation
basically
for
what
you
you were seeing
would be
in some of the
concurrently
agent
improved
representation
if
right now.
I
One of the
had
reasons they say that Ace Bailey
$200
was
in my
having
back
trouble.
pocket right
But
now.
he didn't fall
Well, I don't
as
think
far
I
as
can.
some thought that he might.
Larry,
Utah Jazz picked him up.
$73.
Picked him up at
will you
5,
take a check?
and so not
tell you something.
too sure that
You're
he was
suspect.
excited. Okay,
Yeah, you.
you're suspect. Okay,
I don't know what your
NBA,
reputation is.
You're suspect.
In this town.
Pete, let's roll it back.
But after the shit
and
you tried to
let's
pull
take
today,
it
you bet I'll
through
be looking into you.
and see if we can now. Let's roll through it.
All right.
Let's roll through it. All right. So we got in the zone draft that we took a couple of days before, and we also got
The draft.
the draft last night. All right. And I just think, let me just give you
It's
where
staggering,
I think,
isn't it?
I wanted to because there's something here that has to be said. Number one, fit should be primary. Dylan Harper is going to be a good pro, but you have Stephen Castle, and you're bringing back Wembayana hopefully from an injury. The play there was to take Ace Bailey. But again, they got into Dylan Harper. The hype was going to Dylan Harper. And again, very interesting with the Duke Blue Devils also having three picks in the top 10. They have done that once before when Zion Williamson was drafted as well. It was R.J. Barrett and somebody else. Barrett was okay. Zion hasn't been successful, and the third player that got drafted there wasn't very successful as well. I think you might see some of that set up here. But before I get into it, I want to give you my F grades, Pete, all right? And I want to give you my D grades, all right? Just quickly. Con Knuppel at 4 by the Hornets, absolute F grade. Agor Demin by the Nets at 8, F grade. Raptors, Colin Murray Boyles, 8 and 9, F grade. Spurs, Carter Bryant, F grade. Okay, those are my 4 Fs. What does it take to get an F from me, Pete? Number one is sometimes you have to fit in what I call my translation model. Does your current college game translate to the NBA model? And there's a huge, stark difference between the two. It's one of the reasons that college coaches rarely step into NBA territory and have success. Billy Donovan may be one of the notable names of a college coach that's gone up the ranks and absolutely been able to survive and sustain. Others have come down the ranks. Great coaches. Calipari, in and out. Pitino, in and out. So there's something to be said for this, but right now, when we're talking about getting a team, putting together a profile, and trying to make it work, there's a lot of translation issues on Con Knuppel. There's a lot of translation issues on Colin Murray Boyles. When I took Jeremiah Fears into the statistical realm, I do the same thing. Do the same thing with Agor Demin, who seemed to have a really good following, but he shot under 30%. He spent 1 year at BYU. His turnover numbers were really, really high. I'm not saying I didn't have him drafted at all. And I'm not saying he wasn't draft worthy somewhere along the line, but at 8, it's ridiculous. It's grade F. Colin Murray Boyles, if there's guys like, He might be able to get into that bully game a little bit in the NBA, but here's a guy that's a big, strong body, but he cannot operate outside the lane. And at his size, I think it's going to be difficult for him to translate into the NBA. Again, I wasn't down on Colin Murray-Boyles as a draft pick, but at 9, they messed up. At 9, they messed up.
Do GMs listen to their coaches like for what they need, or does everybody just kind of have blinders on?
The Raptors, they need everything. They literally need everything.
All right, so whatever they can
but
get,
to pass on Kamen Malak there was just nuts to me. The big man from Duke. I think he's got a long way to go, but Toronto would be the right place to have him grow. Igor Demin, I just, with the Nets and some of the other picks here, I gave Carter Bryant from the Spurs. At 14, it's hard to get an F, but it seems like that's where, for me, at least historically, doing this for a while now, that seems to be where most teams find their fault. It seems to be where most teams find their fault, And again, there's an F grade right there at 14 with Carter Bryant. Why do I give Carter Bryant an F grade, Pete? Because he played 1 year at Arizona, didn't start for a lot of the time he was there, and didn't amass anything as far as a year would be. And so what I say is, where these NBA types go wrong, where they get cute, where they get into the hype, is when they believe they know something that nobody else knows. When they believe they have the crystal ball that nobody else knows. Because what you're looking at with Carter Bryant is under 8 points a game, I believe, at Arizona. He didn't start. Why didn't Arizona start him? And why couldn't he prove out better there? And what makes you think that he's now automatically going to jump into the toughest league in the entire world and it's going to magically come on at 14? I didn't get it, man. I didn't get it. Those were my F grades. I can give you my D's. Jeremiah Fears. All right, I wanted him to be drafted. I had him a little bit later. You can see we had him just a little bit later. People are high on him, but he's under 30% from 3-point range. His turnover numbers were very, very high. If you look at Oklahoma's schedule for the 1 year that he was there, they devoured cupcakes and cannolis all the way up till they stepped into their league season. Once they stepped into their league season, his numbers diminished a little bit. If I was an NBA scout, I would have looked at that, and certainly not in the 7 spot. But again, what are the Pelicans going to do? They need more help. They need more help than the Red Cross, the Blue Cross. They need a lot of help. All right, but let's go through it all the way, Pete. Cooper Flagg at number 1. There really was no choice for the Mavericks there.
Yeah, that's consensus.
I'm going to give them a grade A, though, because I think that they're on the right spot. But I'm going to mention something also that's going to be a little bit of a jab at the NBA. But here's something I'm going to throw out there. You haven't had a number 1 American player drafted, white, Caucasian, American player drafted since long time ago. I believe it was Ken Benson, Bill Walton era type stuff. That's how long ago this happened. Now, if you're a failing enterprise, if you're an enterprise where at least a good majority of the people in this country have turned you off, now all of a sudden you gotta welcome yourself back into the family a little bit. And what you do is you make sure that there's a bunch of Caucasian players up on this draft board. Okay? That's what I'm going to leave it at. All right?
Wait a minute.
The NBA is struggling.
Hold on. It didn't help the WNBA.
The NBA...
They're squandering that opportunity.
The WNBA has a different set of problems.
Okay.
The WNBA has a different set of problems. The NBA did not understand you don't kill the golden goose. The NBA never had that problem. Maybe with Will Chamberlain they did back in the day because he was just so dominant. But in the modern day, when Magic and Bird lit the NBA up and actually turned them into a real entity.
Yeah.
Then Jordan came. Jordan got Jordan rules. Then LeBron came. LeBron got LeBron rules. Now SGA is here. SGA is getting SGA rules. So the NBA's always been about that. Always been about that. But again, I think Cooper Flagg, if he remains healthy, one of the things he's going to do in the middle of the season, though, is going to be they look at the roster and they go, well, they have Kyrie and they have Anthony Davis. And in the middle of December, he's going to turn around and those guys aren't going to be there because they're load managing. They're having mental health days. They're just missing games that they've done over the past years at a very, very consistent basis. And he's going to wind up there with Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively. I think there's, the Mavericks aren't as built as everybody thinks. Let me just leave it that way, okay? So Cooper coming in, I gave it an A, but let's move. Spurs, Dylan Harper, I gave it a C. I think Harper's a good player, but I think having him and Castle and De'Aaron Fox in the same positional, you could have went a different way. Ace Bailey was the different way, and that's one of the reasons I pulled the grade down. I think Harper's going to be solid pro, but if his dad wasn't a pro, he wouldn't be number 2. If his dad didn't have all that NBA credential behind him, just like Jace Richardson, you wouldn't have had either one of those guys wouldn't have been in the position they were. But Dylan Harper at 2, I gave it a C. 76ers, VJ Edgecombe, Mercurial. Has superstar potential, has great athleticism, good feel for the game, and if he gets a little tiny bit stronger and really, really spends a lot of time in the laboratory working on that jump shot, I think he could be a good pro. I gave that one a B. 76ers, I really thought that they need some help up front they need some help up front with Embiid being out as much as Embiid is. That's why I put Derek Queen into that spot for them. The Hornets, Con Knuckle, it's one of my F grades. I think Con Knuckle's a solid player, but I think if you're talking about him and Liam McNeely, both being first-round picks, Knuckle, much, much later in the first round, I could have lived with it, but at 4, it's an absolute atrocity to me, and I'm going to give it an F grade. Jazz, Ace Bailey, I gave this one of my first A grades. I'm very high on Ace Bailey, and again, let's talk about it. He might have set a precedent here because they didn't meet with anybody, and he didn't get Shedeur Sanders. So we'll see what happens. He went to 5th pick, didn't lose a ton of money in there. I'm not sure he's excited or pumped about going into Utah, but I think he should be. Utah has Filipowski, another guy, that's young and ready to go. They got, Lauri Markkanen. I think they're all right. He could add something there. I think he's going to be a good pro. Trey Johnson goes to the Wizards. I gave the grade a B. This is maybe the best. Con Knuckle is a great shooter, no question about it. But this young man has some good athleticism to him, and he might be a better shooter than Con Knuckle. So why the Hornets would have taken him instead of Trey Johnson is mind-boggling to me. Will Dawkins and the group down in Washington, I thought, pilled up a pretty good fit for them because they did trade Jordan Poole recently, and I was happy about that. Go with their young guns and try and clean your egos out of your locker room as much as you can. Now you got a good player with Trey Johnson. Flat out shoot the ball all day long. Had a very good first year at Texas. He showed something. That's one of the things I could say I could draft him. He went there 1 year. He led the Big 12 in scoring. He's a good player. I can deal with that. Pelicans, Jeremiah Fears, got to give it a D, Pete. I wanted to go even lower, but it's just too high. Too hyped. He's got some game. He can do some different things. But if you're looking at it from Moneyball perspective and you see a guy with 27% three-point shooting range, you got to move in this NBA. You got to move him down. All right? But the Pelicans, they have Zion. They have Brandon Ingram. They got a lot of issues down there. They could pull it all together. They might be able to make it work. I'm not sure Jeremiah Fears was the answer there, though. The Nets, Agor Demen out of BYU, 1 year, turnover numbers ridiculously high. And a guy who played in Russia, and the European play over there, you usually see much, much better shooting but 27% for me was a turnoff, and his turnover numbers were very, very high. What's going to happen to him in the NBA is he's going to get muscled. Guards are going to get underneath him. Young guards like Mark Sears and some of these other guys that haven't been drafted yet, going to come in hungry. They're going to get after him. That's not going to be a good situation for long, I don't think. Another one, F grade, Colin Murray Boyles to the Raptors. I feel bad for this young man. He gets up. Here's what I'll say to the NBA and all of the young men who got drafted last night. How about we practice a little stoicism, all right? You got guys crying all over the place. Men usually don't cry in public, fellas. I just got news for you, especially men that are getting handed millions of dollars. Okay, I get it. Kaima Malak's out of South Sudan, and it's a great story, and I love it. But you also made millions of dollars where you're at Duke for a year. So, some of the luster's off with the NIL now. These great stories about, now we can buy Mama a house. You could have bought Mama a house last year when you had a $4 million NIL package too. So, but again, a little stoicism. Secondly, the body language was terrible on some of these gentlemen. When Colin Murray Boyles finds out he's going to Toronto, you can see some kind of expletive come out of his mouth. He gets up, and you can see how unhappy he is. My man, you should have been jumping for joy they took you 9th. Because I don't know where I had him, Pete. But if you put up ours, he should have been jumping over the rafters for going 9th because he saved himself a whole lot of money. I didn't have him anywhere in the top 20, I don't think. 11, 10, Rockets, Kaman Malik.
You had him at 29.
29. That was where he should have been, Pete. Kaman Malik, I'll give it a B. I like this. He's got potential. 7'2", shot blocker. It's not going to come right away, but you cannot, and I repeat this on the show very often, you cannot find and you cannot teach 7'2" every day of the week, okay? His wingspan is impressive. Now, his offensive game that I saw him shooting the ball, he's from South Sudan. Okay, they shoot the ball pretty good there. So I would think that he's going to bring something to the NBA that might surprise, where at 7'2", his shooting ability is going to be a little bit better than people think here. That's why I was a little higher on him. But to take Colin Murray Boyles and Igor Demen over a 7'2" potential shot-blocking ace in the NBA was just obscene to me. Sorry, folks, I'm a little fired up today. Trailblazers, Cedric Coward, and then wind up trading the pick. Gave it a B-. I thought Cedric showed well in the combine. Has the NBA translatable skills. I can see that. I can see why they go. Okay, the Bulls drafted Noah Asangwe, the first international player drafted, and they were supposed to go maybe 14 picks without. The Bulls jumped in. I give the pick a C-. I think the Bulls needed help in other areas than what they have right there. The Hawks at 13 took Derek Queen. I gave it a B+. I like the pick. I think it's a steal at 13. Reason I didn't give it an A is because they traded the pick later on. I thought Derek Queen was good. I think they traded the pick for Asa Newell, which I was high on Asa Newell. Asa Newell should have been in this mix right here. Now you trade him down and you make him really essentially the 13th pick. I even had him higher than that, I thought. I thought I had the Nets taking him at 8, Pete. That's who I had the Nets taking. Asa Newell out of Georgia instead of Igor Demen. All right, so again, Derek Queen, I gave it a B+. I like the grade. I think he's going to be a very solid pro. There are some things about him that you don't love. But again, you can't just start picking things here because I'll give you something I don't love about every single one of these guys, including Cooper Flagg. But when you get into certain situations, Kevin Willard, who's been around the game a long time, said if he was a Serbian player or an international player, he'd be drafted number 1. So I'm very high on Queen. I get it. He's got to train better. Somebody got to work with him on his shooting a little bit. But they missed that shot against Colorado State where he went down the lane, pulled up, and went right over the top of that guy. His form didn't look bad to me on that one. So under duress, I think he'll be okay. If you have him in a shooting contest, I think he's going to lose. But if you have him out on the floor at 6'10", great hands, good guard skills. I think you missed it there. Anybody who passed on him that took the Nets didn't take him, to me, is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. The Spurs, Carter Bryant, under 10 points a game at Arizona 1 year. They didn't start him for a number of games. And you would sit there and go, why? They weren't so fabulous that they would have an NBA first-round lottery pick. Carter Bryant, I gave it an F. I gave it an F, Pete. The reason I gave it an F is because that's a second-round pick. That's a 44. That's a 52. That's not a 14, man. It's just not. Not with the other players that were on the board. What in your mind tells you that young man can be better off than some of the other players that are still undraftable? Max Renaud, who averaged a double-double at Stanford and lit up the combine. I don't get it. All right, 15, the Thunder. I like the Thunder's management. Everybody's high on Sam Presti. I think they blew it here. Thomas Sorber, D+. I gave the grade a D+. I had Sorber late first round, I think, maybe early second. I think they passed on a lot of guys here that they could have got. And if I would have been them and they're looking to maybe, bring in a big man that could back up Hartstein, I would have went for Yannick Conan Niederhauser there instead of Thomas Sorber. Sorber had a very good year at Georgetown. I think he's got some significant assets and attributes that are going to be good in the NBA. But I think right here at that pick, it's a little too high. Could have got him later in the draft, maybe not where they had their next pick. The Grizzlies, this was a surprise. 16, they take Yang Hansen from China, who's a 7-footer, highly skilled, got a very, very bright future, but I think he's going to have some strength differential coming into the league. But then the Grizzlies went ahead and traded that pick, and we'll talk about that later. I gave the pick a C- because there is some upside there. There is some upside, 7 foot. But to draft him over, again, some of the other guys I say, Kalkbrenner, Janai Broom, Vlad Golden, some of the guys who spent 4 years in the NCAA and have proven out and have won, I think that's what you're looking for, and I think the NBA gets away from it. That's why so many of these drafts in the past just have so many F grades on them. When you look at them, the former drafts, some of the picks they've done, they're just a lot of F grades. And I think 4 F grades and 4 D grades, 8 picks out of 30, I think that's significant. Here we go again on the international scene. The Timberwolves take Joan Berenger out of Spain. Got some potential there. I see it, but I just, having, Randall and some other guys in that position, I don't really know that that's good fit. I think there were better players available. And again, I think that would, letting Walter Clayton Jr. slide there might hurt because I think the Timberwolves could have used him. Michael Conley's an aging point guard. I think they could have used some vibration there, and I'm pretty high on Clayton. But again, Clayton went very next at 18. The Jazz drafted him, and then the Wizards picked him up. I like this pickup for the Wizards. Walter Clayton Jr., I gave it a B-. I gave the Berenger thing a C because he's international, and to be honest, I just don't know. The Heat at 20, Kasparis Jakushonis, C-. I had him later. Everybody was high on this guy. 1 year, Illinois. I just didn't feel the vibration, didn't see the numbers, didn't see anything that jumped off the page at me. I do see he's got some size. He passes the ball pretty good. But again, he's not a guy that's going to win any shooting contest for you. Jazz, Will Riley. I gave this pick a C+. I think Will's got some growth to do and has some definition to add to his frame. But I think Will Riley's got NBA game. So I think that's not a bad pick. I probably would have given it a B- had I thought about it a little bit more. But again, the Jazz taking Will Riley after drafting Ace Bailey, I just thought was redundancy. I thought you could have went a different direction and helped yourself a little bit more. Again, you got Asa Newell undrafted here, and I thought that was a better pick for the Jazz. The Hawks go in and draft Drake Powell and trade him to the Nets for something that comes in the future, I give the pick a D. Drake Powell, under the Carter Bryant model, under the what did you show me in the 1 year that you had. I'll give you another reason, too. He went to North Carolina, and when he came out and said why his numbers were as low as they were, 7 points a game, real low numbers for a first-round draft pick, to be honest with you. Again, a crystal ball pick. But the thing I didn't like about it was there wasn't a whole lot of loyalty there when he was talking about the situation. He just kind of basically hammered the North Carolina coaching staff, saying that they couldn't handle him as a prospect. He was just too big for them. But I just don't really feel that. Drake Powell there, I gave it a D because there's a chance he's athletic, but I probably, if I slept on it a little bit, I might have given that pick an F. Because you had Asa Newell, and I think Asa Newell at 23, my God, the Pelicans, then to the Hawks. Asa Newell, I gave it an A-. He's got NBA frame, got NBA game. He can shoot, he can pass, he can handle 6'9" with length and can get around the rim and do stuff and can stretch the floor and do some things too. That's the NBA game now. Part of what I think here is just a lot of misreads on where your league is going.
Yeah.
Your league's going Euro. That's why I say Max Renaud. Your league's going into a different frame than it used to be in. That's why I say some guys over the other guys. But again, this is a good example of there's no way in this good earth that Asa Newell should be available at 23 with all of the other guys that you just picked. All right? But Drake Powell goes to the Nets. Now, Egor Demin is about 6'6", probably plays the point. Drake Powell, about 6'6", probably going to be a wing or a two guard. Okay, but you're drafting all guards here if you're the Nets, and this is what I'm going to talk about also. All right, so now we go to the Thunder, which went to the Kings right away. Nick Clifford, I gave it a B. I like Nick Clifford at 24. I think you're getting value. I think you're getting some good stuff there. Had great numbers in the collegiate profile. Has good body, has good frame, shoots it good. I think he could be a nice player in the NBA. Magic, Jace Richardson, again, if his last name was Smith, he wouldn't have been drafted here. D- I gave the grade. Probably an F. I gave it to the Magic. I'll wait and see. I'll wait and see. But Jace Richardson out of Michigan State, no way in that spot. I don't think I even had him drafted. Now he gets into the Nets again in the Ben Surratt, is a C+ for me because I think Surratt could be good, but look at the players they already drafted. They just took Egor Demin, a pretty good point guard with decent size. Ben Surratt is a guard with size. So is Drake Powell. You just drafted three guys that are almost identical. You can throw Drake Powell out of that mix a little bit, but Ben Surratt, I gave it a C+, and again, I want to know how the NBA is going to cover that thing, man. That's not going to be easy. I think they misinterpreted that a little bit. Now, I wouldn't say don't draft him, no question about it, but I want to hear your protocols. I want to know how you got that thing straightened out.
Yep.
All right. The Nets go then Danny Wolf. This I gave a B- because Danny Wolf is almost 7 foot, but Danny Wolf had maybe some of the worst body language at the draft last night. He sat there sullen-faced, looked like he was going to cry, and then got drafted 27th in the first round. What were you crying about?
Yeah, nothing.
What were you upset about? I think we had him higher. Can you find Danny Wolf for us, Pete? I think I had him higher, but 27?
He was at 18.
Yeah, I had him at 18. I gave him the due, but 27 isn't terrible.
He's out of the big money, that's why.
Maybe he watches In the Zone, Pete. Okay. Celtics, Hugo Gonzalez, they go C- there. I just don't know a lot about him, and I think the Celtics should have went with Mark Sears there. Okay? Now, the Celtics made a trade. Celtics made 2 trades. We'll talk about those in the next couple of minutes when we finish this. But there's a lot going on there with the Celtics. Suns go Liam McNeely. I give it a C-. I think that McNeely was a second-round pick, if at best. I think he should have stayed at UConn with the Huskies for another year. Would have made the Huskies a nice team, too. But also, I just don't see the translatables there with McNeely. I don't see the translatables there with Con Knuppel. Sorry. Clippers, Yannick Conan Niederhauser, interesting pick. 7-footer, really lit up the combine. I gave it a B. Folks, we have tonight the second round. I have no idea why they can't do it in one night. They really should just put it together and do it in one night.
They need all this time to talk to all these guys that are crying with their relatives on I saw an interview with who was it? The third pick.
VJ.
Yeah, Edgecombe with his brother who has a different last surname and his mother who has a different last surname, and they're all crying.
The mom was overtaken. She couldn't speak.
Yeah.
And I get that. But it was, and I thought Edgecombe handled himself well. But some of the other guys, their body language was awful. Murray Boyles, awful. Wolf, awful. Some of the other guys also, just their body language wasn't great, And then the crying part of it, I get, those are happy tears, but I'm looking for a little more stoicism. I think what they've done with some of these young men is a little rough. All right, Pete, let's go and let's take a shot here. You got Jordan Sutter co-host flashing up there.
That's old.
Jordan's going to like that. All right.
That's better.
So this is the Dukes. The Dukies, have several number ones. The most recents, they had Art Heyman way back in the day. But the most recents were Elton Brand in 99.
Okay, I remember that name.
Kyrie in 2011.
Yep.
Zion Williamson in 2019. Paolo Banchero in 2022, now Cooper Flagg in 2025. Okay, some pretty good pros in there, some good stories, some bad stories. Okay, here's the Nets, torching number one picks. Agor Demin, number 8. Nolan Traore, number 9. You know what Nolan Traore does, Pete? He's a guard. He's a point guard out of France.
Oh, good
He's
Lord.
a guard. Okay, so you got guard, Ben Saraf, guard, Danny Wolf. We put him as a forward. Drake Powell, guard. I will go out on a limb and say 3 of the 5 of those guys don't make the team. They don't make the roster. That's what I'm going to say right there.
So why do you draft them then?
I think they effed up. And I think that they would sit there and be celebrating and high-fiving like that. I would clean that whole group out too. All right. Who's left? Who's left, Pete? Second round tonight. Who you got left? I'll give you some names, okay? My guy, Max Renaud, no way. This guy should not have been taken in the first round, NBA people. 20-10. 20-10. You're suspect. Out of Stanford. High level basketball. Very, very good shooter of the basketball. And guess what else, Pete? 7 foot. I mean, how do you pass on that?
Right.
He's got to get stronger. No question.
Yeah.
But half of these guys got to get stronger.
Yeah, you got to transition from the college game.
Rasheer Fleming, St. Joseph's. We had him in the first round, I believe. I see what NBA teams are saying. There's not a lot of A-10 guys out there that are NBA, doing great in the NBA. Bones Highland and the guy that was drafted from Dayton, but spent the whole year hurt. It's tough to see how he'll go, but there's not a lot of that. But I thought Fleming had a good NBA fit. I thought he was a good prototype NBA guy, long as can be, shoots it pretty good, comes out of Philly, tough, Cam Jones from Marquette, I would have put him in the first round too. Mark Sears, you're going to miss on that one. The kid can flat out shoot the basketball. Janai Broom, I don't know. I don't know why people are not up on him as a higher pick. Ryan Kalkbrenner, left on the dust here. He should have been a first-rounder, in my opinion. Vlad Golden, I probably would have looked at him as a first-rounder as well. Dawson Garcia, still available, probably should have been a first-rounder. Nate Biddle, solid, out of Oregon. I would have liked to seen the Celtics maybe grab him early in the second round. And Nelly Joseph, I think could be a very good pro as well for somebody that's looking for a little help up front. Okay, Rutgers has not had a top 5 player in a really, really long time. They just had two drafted, okay? What you wonder is with those 2 draft picks, why they had as bad a year as they did. Harper at number 2 to the Spurs, Bailey at number 5 to the Jazz. Great number for the Rutgers people down there. But again, you got to wonder why you didn't have better success with those 2 guys if those 2 guys are as good as everybody says they are. Again, maybe it's translatable. The college game, now they get into the open floor of the NBA and it's more of a good feel for them. I don't know, but it's really still basketball. You got to look at what they did. And again, that would be the one question mark hanging over both of those gentlemen for me is why didn't they do a little bit better while they had a testing ground? But they put up great numbers. They really did. They didn't win. That's a concern for me. Montverde is a prep school. out in Florida that has a chance to bring in postgraduate players and other players last night in the draft. I want you to hear, because this is what I say about Cooper Flagg. You know, like, he played on a team at Montverde. You're going to hear the guys that were on his team right now. Impossible to lose a game. They're winning by 40, 50, 60 points a game. Not really a great test. Now you go to Duke and you play on one of the great NCAA teams, loaded with talent, 2 other top 10 picks on your team. I just wonder what happens when he gets to Dallas and they get there and it's not loaded like that. Is he going to be able to carry that? I don't know. But again, Montverde, fearsome foursome taken last night. Everybody else was playing for second when you played this team. Cooper Flagg taken at number 1. Liam McNeely was on that team, taken at number 29. Asa Newell, who went to Georgia, was on that Montverde team and was 23rd pick. And the big dog, Derek Queen, taken at 13. Kevin Boyle and Kevin Boyle Jr., now at Spire Academy of Ohio, were the coaches of that team and architects of that team. Pete, a quick run through the NBA Finals. I know we touched on it a little bit in Pete's Corner, but we're going to give it to you here real quick. The Thunder, 103-91 over the Pacers. The Achilles heel of Halliburton, another Achilles injury, Pete. I think you got to go a little bit with something that's going on there. Everybody wants to chalk it off to the low-top sneakers, but I think you'd have a whole lot more injuries than that if you did. All right, so SGA getting away with an awful lot, and the refs just didn't get any of it. Jalen Williams was a co-MVP of this series. SGA was given the MVP. Great run by the Pacers. But I'm going to go off the track here a little bit. What happened with the Pacers when Halliburton got hurt, they put in T.J. McConnell. It was too much T.J. Went a little crazy. And instead of, they went into like Jalen Brunson format there. Instead of the Pacers moving that rock, getting it all into the good positions and getting a lot of guys a lot of touches, it was all TJ, too much TJ's dad, and it wound up doing the Pacers solid. Okay? Put them in the tank, unfortunately. Here's a couple of the trades we wanted to talk about. They're racking up in Boston, the trades. Pete and I, if you watched a couple of previous shows, we told you this was coming. I would be surprised, because this guy's a bit of a golden boy, but I would be surprised in NBA measure if Brad Stevens survives all of this. All right? Because right now, the Celtics, I'm going to give it to him on the Jrue Holiday with Anthony Simons pick. All right? I think that was okay. Holiday's been hurt a lot. He's getting older. Anthony Simons is a pretty young, talented player in the NBA. Great numbers. Great profile. But, I think it might have been time with the Celtics to move him on. I don't have a problem with that trade that much. When we got into this three-way thing with Porzingis, that's where I got a little bit lost. Okay, they wanted to get rid of Porzingis. But basically, you could say the Holiday thing is kind of a wash. Right? Good, solid veteran for an up-and-coming young point guard player. I don't really have a whole lot of issue there. But when you get Porzingis and he goes for Georges Niang and a future second-round pick, you basically just had to let him go because he makes too much money. Because you overloaded your luxury tax, because you overloaded your salary cap. Now you basically got to cut some really valuable players to your organization and take in a whole lot less. The Hawks walk away with this, like they're walking away with the steal here. They get Porzingis and a future second-round pick, and Brooklyn gets Terrence Mann, which is they're some of those pieces, but they also get a 2025 first-round pick. So that the number 22 was how they got. The fifth-round pick, but they wasted it on Drake Powell, if you ask me. All right, the Pelicans, they took in Poole and Sadiq Bey. The Wizards got McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second-round pick. What that tells me is they just wanted to get rid of Jordan Poole. They just wanted him out. Okay, and then the Celtics doing what the Celtics are doing right now. I think that you're probably going to see more of that.
Fire sale.
But Pete was the one who called it. He said, does this create a flurry of trades? and a situation where you're going to have all these trades popping and going. And Pete, you know, right before it was boom, 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 and then always on draft night you have a lot of trades, you know, where teams have to be colluding with each other a little bit, you know, prior to the draft, where they say, okay, if you draft so-and-so and we draft so-and-so, we'll swap picks with you. Why they can't draft their guy there and they can't draft their guy there? Probably because they think somebody else is going to take them.
Snag them, yeah.
Prior to that, you know, like the Jazz thought, you know, Walter Clayton was going to go, you know, so they wound up grabbing him a little earlier. That can happen. But some of the gun, I'm just shaking my head. I'm really looking forward to the second round tonight because the first round was such a disappointment for me, to be very honest with you. Some of these NBA teams really need to have their head examined. And as I said earlier in the show, might be time to blow the thing up a little bit. You know, Adam Silver comes out, you know, he's a skeleton. You can hardly see him when he stands there. If he stands sideways, you can't see him. You know, he's not the best spokesperson for the league right now. You know, let Barkley handle that. Let somebody with some personality handle that. You know, somebody who can, you know, get in with the players and stuff and also has that experience as well. Silver just don't do it for me. Pete, we'll be back next week with the second round. We'll close it all the way up. We'll give you some team grades. We'll give you some of that stuff. But then we're also going to move in because the NCAA Combine, all the NCAA players, all of the draft players will be moving into the NBA Summer League, and we can't wait for that. Summer League's about to kick. Like we said, it never stops, folks. That's why you're in the zone. We're trying to keep you informed. We will see you next week in the zone.